kind of high level support for community energy, and people generally kind of started to lose in national policy. So I would say one of the key weaknesses at the moment is that you read any of the strategies coming out and people just isn't mentioned. It's all very much focused on kind of that big technological innovation. So I think that's really the biggest overarching challenge. And then, of course, the removal of feed-in tariffs. So for us, it wasn't the fact that it was the way it went. So community energy is really just starting to scale up, just starting to kind of really make an impact. And the surplus from those renewable energy projects were then going into tackling fuel poverty, energy efficiency. We were just getting to the scale and the business models to start to make that happen. And then the rug was just pulled away. So for me, it's that ongoing lack of certainty and policy stability, which of course impacts the energy sector as a whole, but does impact more on community energy.
Can I just add to what Emma's very well put there is just the little nuance that things are different in Scotland and have been for quite a long time. And Scotland has shown for quite a long time a much more insightful approach to policymaking with a local and community energy emphasis. For example, that was where we first had a policy target to achieve renewables from the community energy sector. We had things like a registrar of community benefits, quite a lot of innovative policy approaches, which subsequently eventually got taken up elsewhere.
So have Scotland got it right then?
Well, every context is different, but they certainly have a much more deep appreciation, I think, of the necessity to bring communities with you in an energy transition, rather than having some kind of top-down imposition of technological change or an understanding that communities count, communities matter. So not sure I'd say that Scotland is perfect, but there are certainly things that they're doing better than we are in other parts of the country.
What do you mean Scotland isn't perfect? How dare you?
Oh.
But I think, if you're reading the local paper, National Scottish News, regularly you see about land buyouts, community land buyouts. And I think, is this maybe what you're speaking to, is this broader culture about giving the community control, ownership, able to govern their own spaces, and that energy is just part of the piece there?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I wanted to say today is that you can't really think about local energy or community energy or decentralized energy without thinking about the broader political structures in any given political context. The fact is, in the UK, local authorities for a very long time have not really had much power, much teeth, much of a funding kind of strong base upon which to do action in the energy space, in a completely different way to what you see in other European countries, noticeably Denmark, Austria, other places where, for example, city councils get large-scale energy supply, district heating projects off the ground, and no one seems to bat an eyelid. And yet it just doesn't seem to happen here. And that's because we have a much more centralised political system with much less enabling powers at local authority level. I was just going to mention today, for example, Woking. Way back in the early 2000s, Woking were trying to do what we would call smart energy now, private wire systems, CHP, district heating, and they just couldn't. They just couldn't because the regulations weren't there, the powers weren't there, the funding wasn't there. So the appetite has been there, but in the system we have, it hasn't really enabled councils to grasp the nettle and get on with it alongside community groups too.
So I want you to unpick a few things that you've just said, Patrick, because you talked about, we started talking about community energy and talking about how that's very kind of grassroots action and a lot of people getting involved through community groups. Now we're starting to talk about local energy and local authorities. So is that something that we're seeing, a changing landscape, local authorities taking a stronger role or a less strong role? How is community energy evolving, I guess, alongside local energy, and what are some of the differences you're seeing or similarities you're seeing between community energy and local energy?
We shouldn't be talking about either or. So community energy is part of local energy. It just adds value. So the ideal is everyone working together on this. So local authorities should be working with community groups, and they've both got their own strengths. So by bringing that together, it just completely compounds that added impact by working together. So I think I'm very keen not to say that it's either or that we're in competition with each other.
Yeah, I would fully back that up. But I would also add that I think community groups take action out of a sense of frustration that no one else is doing what they think is absolutely urgent and necessary. There has been a waxing and waning, unfortunately, of central government support for community energy. And I think it would be interesting for us all to discuss what the recent shift towards the local energy approach means and whether it means what we're talking about or something else. But I think one of the big difficulties with a situation where councils in particular don't have the capacity to act in this space is that communities do take action, but not every community has got the wherewithal to do that. So you get a very, very unequal playing field with community groups sprouting up in places where people happen to have the time and the energy and the capital to do so. But that's a fundamentally problematic way of delivering local energy change and energy transitions, because you're going to get innovation in some places, not others, and it'll probably not happen in the places where it happens most, where people are really, really struggling with life generally and with poverty in particular.
So what needs to happen to change that?
In some senses, we need a better blend of top-down and bottom-up without a concerted acknowledgement and appreciation by national government that local actors do local energy best. Without that, nothing's really going to change. And yet at the same time, what they cannot do is to create a kind of a one-size-fits-all template and push it on local places and local communities, assuming that it's going to work because it's been dreamt up by some group behind closed doors, and they're looking for a standardized model to roll out. There has to be this attempt to bring people with us in a participatory manner and an appreciation of the fact that places differ, challenges differ, needs differ, capacities differ, and therefore you need some kind of process which enables everybody to reach that end goal, but recognises that the ingredients may subtly differ between places along the way.
I'd actually also like to ask Fraser, Matt and Becky what your thoughts are on this, because you've all been involved in community energy in different ways. So, what's your take on this?
How long have you got?
I think community energy has a massive role to play, but not on its own. So it's not just about community energy and local government for me, but it's also about engaging all of those critical stakeholders, including incumbent players, including new business entrants, including, national policymakers and so on, in driving forward the change. I think we need a coherent vision that we're all working towards, recognizing that there are clear contextual differences. But for me, it's all about that collaboration, because if we need to deliver net zero at the pace and scale that's going to be in line with our national targets, and more to the point, what the world needs, no one stakeholder group's going to do that alone. Again, it's not just about energy. So, and I think it's, for too long, we've used energy kind of synonymously with electricity. And now we're starting to talk about energy in kind of its multiple forms. But it's about more than just energy. It's about lots of different elements of I guess, sustainability and lifestyle coming together to drive that better future.
Right. So as we're all doing a kind of confessional, then I'll have 10 seconds as well to get it off my chest. My worry is that with community energy is we don't have the sense of community that we maybe once did. I take what you said about before, Patrick, about the grass wasn't always greener, some time ago, and things weren't rosier. But I worry that there isn't the social network to support this. Yeah, in the same frame, I think these projects can engender that sense of community. So I think some won't get off the ground because there isn't that community, but they can also create community. And so that's where I think government support's so critical, to not give a community a reason, not to do something.
I think there's a problem. I think there's a problem even in Scotland with this, where we've got a lot of government support and a lot of romanticising of the Scottish local community energy sector, which is very, very good and very bustling and very healthy. But I think it still has a bit of an inequality issue, not just in terms of where the benefits are going and how you pitch those benefits, but I think we still have an image of community energy as being wind turbines on Barra. We still think of it as rural. We think of it as sort of middle-income communities who are benefiting from it. And I don't think we've done enough to pitch to a broader coalition of people to get behind it. So I think we have an issue where we on the front of every single community share offer ever in Scotland is a turbine on an island somewhere. And I think we need to do better to shake that image and show that actually we do have the tech there, as everyone said, but tech to work in cities. So the work that we do with Glasgow Community Energy specifically targets lower income areas to try and get some of the benefit in there for communities who maybe don't have the time to navigate the huge bureaucratic processes that can often accompany community energy projects. And actually, that's a really good cue to introduce Glasgow Community Energy, the project that I'm a board member for, and that's installed community solar on the roofs of 2 schools in Glasgow. We're really proud of how far we've come with the project and its potential to be a blueprint for urban community energy, both in Glasgow and further afield. But I wanted to give you, as part of this episode, an honest insight into the problems that the project has faced and how much tenacity was ultimately required to get it off the ground.
I'm Ellie Harrison. I'm one of the board members of Glasgow Community Energy, and we're a new renewable energy co-op for Glasgow, just about to launch. We've now got solar panels on the roofs of 2 schools in Glasgow. One is in Easterhouse, it's Ashton Secondary School. One is in Pollokshields, Glendale Primary School.
Perfect, thank you. I should declare at this point as well that I am also a board member at Glasgow Community Energy, which is going to be the topic of the discussion. So just to get that conflict of interest out of the way nice and early. But Ellie, you've been in this for longer than me. You effectively founded Glasgow Community Energy. What was the process of that? When did it start? Give us a little bit of background.
Yeah, well, it's going back about 6 years now, so I think back to 2015.
Has it been as much as that?
Yeah.
6 years.
I guess I'd sort of, all of the work that I'm involved in, because I'm involved in quite a lot of public transport campaigning, and all of it is based around the need to reduce carbon urgently and frustration at government action over that. Like, it's not happening fast enough. So I was aware of kind of other community energy projects and was inspired by those. But at the same time, actually, I was also interested in, I guess, like how funding systems work in general, and especially in the arts, which is, you know, where I trained and worked before. There's a lot of fossil fuel companies that are kind of sponsoring things in the arts that, you know, they're just doing that to sort of legitimize a business model which is causing climate catastrophe. So I was thinking about like what alternatives exist, and is there any such things, a kind of ethical and autonomous funding stream that you could put into arts projects, community projects. And that's when I started looking more at community energy and what other community groups had done, which is set up cooperatives so that they're owned by the members, run by the members, and that any profit they make, especially through a community benefit society, which is the sort of cooperative that we are, can then be reinvested into the community, and is very, very sort of proudly going to be a project which is by Glasgow for Glasgow, and we want members, we want people to join who are local, and we really want, when we launch our community share offer, it's an opportunity for people to join the co-op, and we really want to get as many local members on board as possible, because we see that as kind of how we're going to grow. Like, it's definitely still small in comparison to other community energy projects. Like, we've only got 2 sites, but I think we need to start somewhere, and it almost didn't happen. So what we've got now is something to be really proud of after all the struggle to get to this point.
Yeah. Oh, completely. And I think one of the things that stuck with me through the process when we were trying to get it off the ground and trying to get support was the idea that you need to have some kind of demonstrator, there needs to be some kind of precedent for it, there needs to be some example to point to say, no, look, honestly, this can actually work. And I think even though it's a small scale that we're working at just now, that's so important, not just for the future of Glasgow Community Energy, but any other community group that wants to start up something similar in Glasgow. The precedent is now there. For you, Ellie, what were the biggest sort of barriers along the way to getting? Bearing in mind we're now generating, it's been 6 years in the making. What were the big barriers to overcome in that time?
Lots of little hurdles and then a few very large hurdles. I mean, we got funding to start off with, so that was in 2018. So we'd already the idea had already been about for 3 years by then before we got funding from the Scottish Government. that actually opened quite a lot of doors, because we then got a development officer who worked for Local Energy Scotland working with us. They kind of, once they'd invested in us with a grant, then they were kind of invested in us, to try and make a success of the project. So, and it meant we could bring in expertise. We could bring in renewable energy experts to do feasibility studies and stuff like that. So that was the first kind of little hurdle. But then it just really intensified